Hey, this is Eric Johnson, the brand.
And Aaron Thigpen, the source. Today's topic, so your kid's got Little League arm. Whose fault is it? A Little League arm is very common nowadays.
Oh, man.
And it's a problem I run into with my athletes. And I'm always trying to counsel these athletes and parents on how to prevent it and fix it. But the one thing that seems to be most common is they always want to blame the coach. And I've got mixed emotions on that.
The coach is the blame for that guy that comes out, Aaron, and we're playing a scrimmage or a game, and it's a Saturday or a Friday, and a guy goes out and he throws 30 pitches, and then comes out and says my arm is bothering me, and next thing you know, next week in practice, coach, my arm's still bothering me. That's Wednesday. Go to the next practice, it's Friday. Hey coach, my arm is bothering me. Now we have an issue. We go, okay, so what's going on? And we've been warming up properly, but the player has no communication. It's just going by what they know. And this is happening from ages 9 all the way up to 16. It's amazing. So they go, the parent calls you and says, hey, listen, my kid's arm is messed up. He threw too many pitches. Well, he threw 30 pitches. That is within the guidelines of PitchSmart, and he only do 30. And they were, that's over 2 innings. He threw 14 the first one, and the second inning he threw 16, and his arm's bothering him, So you see this a lot with kids these days. Personally, I'm finding kids who are not only pitchers but position players are having arm problems. And do they blame the coach, or like, oh, he threw too hard? I hear that one, they threw too hard, or they threw too far, or they're doing that stuff. Aaron, it's something that I think the players don't really take seriously during the week. They don't have throwing practices outside of their real practice, and there is no arm care outside of practice. Now for us, we have arm care within our program. We have Jaeger bands, we have exercises to get you loose, and so by the time the player is ready to throw, they're sweating already. That's a good start right there. But why are we blaming the coach if the player is not taking care of their arm care outside of practice? And what I mean by that, Aaron, and this really is up your alley, is this sports performance. Because you see players come into game speed and it's like they have no conditioning of their body or their arm at that time.
Yeah. Well, I guess I wanted to start it from this aspect. My answer to most parents are, it's not your coach's responsibility. Ultimately, it's you're responsible for your athlete's health and future, and you never want to put that in anyone else's hands.
Right.
And so that means you need to arm yourself with information, and proper information. So you need to talk to professionals. You need to research, and then take that information and have an intelligent discussion with your coach so that you can come to an agreement, or at least see where the coach is coming from and understand their philosophy around how many pitches, what types of pitches, what kind of volume and load that an athlete should be able to handle, and then come to some kind of agreement from that standpoint. Now that might bring to light some things that you guys are neglecting.
Right.
You're not conditioning your athlete. Again, baseball is one of these sports where kids play year round, and that's all they do is play.
Right.
And they don't work on their bodies. Well, or most injuries in baseball are repetitive stress injuries. Well, if you're doing the same thing over and over again for 9 months, and you're not doing the background or supportive work to build the endurance and strength, and to be able to maintain that through the course of that playing period, something's gonna go sooner or later. It's not a matter of if, but when. And so, again, my thing is, hey parents, be a little more proactive and be a little more engaged in what your athlete's doing. And again, it comes down to communication. But you also need to teach your athlete how to communicate. And they need to be able to articulate and not be afraid to tell a coach or a parent or some other adult about how their body is feeling. And you need to also create an awareness, because some kids don't know. They don't know the difference between soreness and an injury. And if you've got a mentality of, tough it out, well, then that really confuses the athlete, because they're caught between a rock and a hard place. And so what ends up happening is they keep making a bad situation worse, and then it comes to a head, and now you've got an injury. That might require surgery or rehab or something else, which can be, I think most throwing injuries are completely preventable if you're monitoring, if you're communicating, and if you're armed with the right information with your athlete. And so that takes work, parents. But again, it's your athlete, and you shouldn't leave that to anyone else's hands.
I agree with that, Aaron. And if you're playing travel baseball, as I'd say 70-80% of these kids, or 90% of the kids, there needs to be some sort of throwing protocol. Meaning from the start of the season. In the fall, what are we doing? You just have come out of the summer season. You've been on a break. That break could be anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, depending on how extensive your travel program is. There needs to be that rest period there. So when you start off again in the fall, there needs to be some sort of, you got to start it back up again. You just can't come out and just start throwing where you were at the end of the summer. That's when injuries hurt, when the arm is not conditioned. So the first couple weeks when you start your fall program, you're playing long toss. You're not going out to the furthest point. Your arm is not conditioned. Probably a month into that season, the fall season, you should be at least heading out to that point, or getting to that point with no soreness. You're going out on your own in terms of how far you go and how much your shoulder is opening up to get some sort of extension, some distance. And then as you pull down, or you bring in closer and closer to end your session, you should be able to throw the ball on a line with some discomfort. So if that goes on, your fall program goes on for 8 weeks, and then you stop playing again, which most kids do, that's 8 to 10 weeks in the fall. Now you're dropping that ball for a good 3 months, at least. A good 3 months. During that 3 months, you've got this rest period where you let your body kind of rest a little bit. But after about 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to start a preventative throwing program with conditioning with sports performance, how to get the shoulder stronger. And this is right up your alley, Aaron, and you can speak towards this. But there needs to be some sort of preventive and strengthening measures during that time, because that period could be 3 months to 3.5 to 4 months before they're really throwing the ball again for the upcoming season. It's just like a major league player. They're trying to get that body straight. So when they do that, then they're ready to go and start a new throwing program for the upcoming season after December. And I think a lot of times, Aaron, that's not being done. You see, it's just throw the ball, we're ready to play season, and every season just play. And I think that's where arm injuries, or low league elbow, or low league shoulder, or he's got some sort of tendonitis. These injuries, and if they keep on happening, lead to bigger and worse things down the road, not only on the short term with the younger players, but as a player grows and gets stronger, that's always going to be an issue.
Right. No, I agree. And on the baseball side, I would say have your kids' throwing analyzed. Don't take it for granted that your kid is throwing properly.
Right.
And, go to a reputable coach or a professional who can analyze it, who can watch your kid throw. They may even want to film it and start there. Then the second thing would be start to chart their range of motion.
Wow.
Do a range of motion check at the beginning of every preseason to see where the athlete's range of motion is, and then maybe you check it intermittently if there's been a high volume of throwing, or you check it at the end of the season so you know, hey, how much degradation over this period of time, and make notes of any problems that have been happening along the way. But journalize all of that sort of thing, and it doesn't hurt to keep a light journal of just the number of throws that you do during the week. Even if it's just a guesstimate, and you just put in, hey, the week of 9/17, I threw approximately 100 throws, or whatever. And then you can start to see if there is a problem that creeps up. Well, hey, leading up to that, I had 8 weeks of 100+ throws. Maybe that volume was a little too much for me. So let me make some adjustments moving forward. But chronicling that information allows you to look back and now make the proper adjustments that you need to make. And it also will get the athlete an opportunity to get in tune with his body, because he can say each week, hey, had 100 throws, my arm felt great. Next week, had 100 throws, my arm felt great. Next week, my arm was a little tight today, and so forth and so on. And you can start to recognize some trends that you may be able to head off any future problems.
It's interesting you say that, because as a coach and watching kids throw, I know what kids are going to have arm troubles.
Yeah.
Because you said if you get an eval and stuff, you start talking kids. That's why I think the most important time in practice is the training part. You and I talk about training. We don't call it a warm-up. We call it training.
Yes.
The training's not done properly. And I think as a coach and basically as a parent, I would ask the organizer, what are you guys doing in your training portion? Yeah. As we'll say layman's terms, warm-up, but we're going to call it training, because it is training to me. What are you doing? I'd ask that, what kind of training are you doing? If you want to really research it, go out and watch your throwing program. Watch your kids' throwing program. Watch how they train, how they warm up the body. Because if the body's not sweating during the training phase, then when we go to throw the ball in our extended training phase, players have injuries. And I can see if a player's arm is dropping low, his fingers aren't on top of the baseball, and they're not throwing, their fingers aren't behind it, and they're throwing it, you can see it's an elbow problem already. Now, why is it elbow? Maybe it's a shoulder stabilization thing, which is causing those fingers to get on the side of the ball.
Right.
So the question I have for you, Aaron, is when you're in here training players, can you tell that there is going to be some sort of breakdown in the elbow or the shoulder with this player if they're not doing some of the exercise you're doing in your Young Guns program or your Top Gun program?
Yeah. I mean, part of our initial eval does a shoulder analysis for front side, back side in terms of strength and those ratios, which for me is kind of a big indication of, okay, here's an athlete that can potentially have some issues. I don't do a whole video analysis because we just don't have the time. That actually would have to be a separate session, to do that. But we do start with that, and then when I watch kids during some of our other programs, I'll say, "Hey, EJ, is that kid throwing right? It looks a little funny to me."
Right, exactly.
Again, I stay in my lane, but I know how the body works, and I can see some things, and I'm like, well, that looks like a problem. Just hasn't happened yet. So yeah, those are some things that I'll do, but I just think it doesn't take, it's a good investment for the parent to say, hey, let's go someplace, wherever it may be. Maybe it's a PT place. Maybe it's a trainer who has a battery of tests that they can put together, like myself. Maybe it's a coach, a pitching coach who knows arm mechanics. And can give you that initial feedback that will let you know. And then you can plot a course for the proper warm-up, the proper, maintenance for that athlete's arm. And it will change as they grow. So this should be an annual to a semi-annual sort of thing. It's not just a we did it when he was 12, he's 14 now.
It's
the body changes.
Thing.
Exactly. So that would be my answer to how to handle that.
You know, one point that you mentioned earlier, and we struggle. Our athletes struggle with this. I don't get this. So I'm trying to understand. Player has an arm issue. Players are afraid to talk to the coach. You said communication and awareness of the player's part, and the parents then tell you after the fact. You know, I think, you know, my advice to parents and players is, if there's an arm issue, you know, if they make 2 or 3 throws and they go, oh, my arm's hurt, that's probably because the arm's not warmed up yet. Throw a little bit longer and see what the arm is. Now, if they start to go back and they say, I'm still having that soreness, wait till they get to the phase to where, you know, they're, you know, at a point to where they're loose a little bit before you start saying, hey, his arm's hurting. Now, if this continues to go on for day after day, now you know he has an arm injury. But some kids aren't warmed up properly.
Right.
It goes back to the training phase that sometimes the kids are just not pushing it and training hard enough to get the body properly warmed up. So the communication thing is huge. And when the kids need to also be thrown outside of practice, and we talk about this a lot, is that if a kid would just go out and throw 5 to 7 minutes outside of their scheduled team practice 2 times a week, they wouldn't have any arm issues. We're just asking an athlete though 4 days a week. Those arm injuries that start to go away. Now, if you just said 5 to 7 minutes, probably going to extend out to about 100, 120 feet. That's good enough so we don't have any issues. But if a player is just going out playing practice 2 days a week and they don't throw the other 5 days, that is a arm injury waiting to happen.
Yeah.
It is.
And they also should be doing some sort of performance training on that arm twice a week. And I'm not talking full-blown weightlifting or anything like that, but I'm also not just talking regulating it to J-bands, because there has to be some stimulation, and obviously it's going to be based on the development level of the athlete, but you've got to make some the appropriate adjustments, and a J-band might be appropriate for an athlete at a certain age or a certain stage in their development. But you may grow out of that, and you have to understand that that you have to. There's variations and there's levels of how you're going to have to train that arm, and you're going to have to put in a variety of exercises, and not just say, okay, well, this is my, you know, J-band routine, or this is my
It's more than J-bands.
Dumbbell routine. You know, you've got to look at a few different modalities, and you've got to be able to move them up in varying degrees of intensity and down, and that will help keep the arm healthy.
Well, let me ask you this, because, you know, as we getting close to wrapping up some things here, how many parents actually come up to you and ask you about arm care maintenance of a baseball player, any baseball player that walks through the doors here at Game Speed? How many parents actually talk to you about that?
0. Unless they're coming because they've had an injury.
So my eyes are wide open right now.
Nothing is preventative.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing, because, wow, I'm almost speechless, Aaron.
Yeah.
You know that
most will come or will talk about that after they've already gotten in trouble or had some past troubles with an arm. No one asks for that off the top. The number one request is velo.
So everybody wants to go. So you're saying that everybody wants to walk through the door and say, I want to throw harder.
Yes. But not safer.
But let me ask you a question then. If that's the case, what if the player has bad mechanics?
Right.
And they can't throw harder because their shoulder's not stabilized and their elbow's not in a good place and they don't have good throwing mechanics, then isn't that theory of throwing hard goes right out the window?
Yes. And that's why we have the proliferation of arm injuries that we do nowadays.
Wow. Well, there it is, people. There it is. You know, I guess that kind of wraps up that subject, and puts it in a nice tight bow at the end there, Aaron.
Yeah. Parents, take charge of your athlete's athletic career. Communicate with your athlete, communicate with your coaches, and all those involved with your athlete. Be preventative, be proactive, not reactive.
I like that, Aaron. All right, people. That's going to conclude our podcast today. This is Eric Johnson, the brand.
And Aaron Thigpen, the source. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and all social media. We'll see you later.